Thanks for supporting. I think it's actually, I find it, I was just telling Susan, it's like it's such an honor to be here because it's the last Dimox of Hong Kong. My favorite bookstores are just disappearing one by one, so it takes a lot of spirit to get together and continue to insist on talking about books, to be old-fashioned, I suppose. And I didn't start out writing. I'm an engineer by training. I studied in Canada, do environmental engineering. That's what I did. Then I came back. I'm the only one I know in Hong Kong that's lived in the same building since I was 3 years old. I still live in the same building, except for the time that I spent in Canada. But anyway, that's what I did, and I studied environmental engineering. And when I finished in '78, I came back to Hong Kong. But back then, it wasn't very popular. It was very difficult to find jobs. Basically, wasn't any jobs in environmental engineering. It was very new in Canada even. So when I told people, my technical background, it's sewage treatment. You might have to cut that part too. Right? But it's sewage treatment is it's stinky. But I call myself environmental engineer. But back then, when you tell them that you do environmental engineering, they always say, "Oh, yeah, you vegetarian as well?" That kind of vegetarian. Yeah, which is like weird enough back then. And time has changed. But back when I came back, there wasn't any job, so I was forced to start my own private practice, which I did for a number of years. And then to make a very long, turbulent story short, I retired in 2008. And all my friends like to say that early, they call it early retirement. But I say, I don't know. I said, time will tell, depending when I die, right? If I die early, that would be late retirement. So you have to come back. We don't know.
We don't know.
But anyway, I retired at that relatively young age because I think that is my. I advertise indolence in a way. I'm very proud to have no work ethics whatsoever, which is not true. I believe it. I worked very, very hard when I was running my private practice. But when I thought it was enough, I wanted to do things I like, or my favorite inactivities, rather than continue to go to work every day with a tie around my neck, which I really, really hated. But fine, that's what part of the thing, so that in some ways lead me to why I wrote this story. Because when I was working, I'm never a tree hugger. I've learned through my profession, learned a lot about the environment, but from a very pragmatic angle. And when I was working, one of the things that kind of always fascinated me was how Hong Kong especially, although I was very much a part of the working culture, how people work, overwork, I would say. What do I mean by overwork? Because I think if we all need to work. If I need to work to make a living, I work very, very hard, But I've observed a lot of my colleagues, my business associates, they're way past that point, and we tend to work for the sake of working. So in some ways there's nothing wrong, and conventionally we all respect hardworking people. But it's not in the old days anymore. And don't forget, when we work without needing the work, we are generating, there's an environmental cost to activities, and this environmental cost benefits nobody. In fact, you might even say arguably, overworking unnecessarily, it's bad, not just for the environment, it's also bad for our health. It stresses people up, gives them bad digestions, and so on. So when I zoom out and I see the whole world is like that, is that something wrong? It was just a question to myself. And I also realized that a lot of the things we do, nobody seems to notice, and in some ways it's like, nobody cares. But why is that the case? Because if you look at especially environmental issue, it's not a moral issue like some. I think some put it almost like a moral issue, which I never agree. I look at it as a survival issue, you know, and human beings, Homo sapiens, are now on top of the food chain, you know, and we take it for granted. Basically because we're thoughtful and ruthless. We're clever and ruthless, and we care about our survivability, and that's why we're here. But perhaps we've lost that. So from all this, you know, pointless thinking, when I'm at work, when I look like this, that's what this kind of thing that went through my head. So when I retired, I decided to start writing a book about it. And I thought, if we don't know what's going on now, it could be partly because of that whenever we're in a situation, we tend to be blind to it. That's classic. So if we can have some hindsight, what would we look like in hindsight? So the easiest way to borrow hindsight is to write a book that's set in the future. So I look back on the book and see where we are. And therefore I started writing it. And the first thing I noticed is also time alone doesn't give you any hindsight. If the situation hasn't changed at all, you can go 200 years into the future. We'll still be the same. We'll have the same similar blindness and so on. And it's important that the situation changes, and that whenever the situation changes, it forces people to look at what did we do wrong, or why are we here, and so on. So that's basically my thinking process when I started writing the story. And then well, I can help having a lot of background knowledge and feelings about the environmental protection. And so I thought one of the things, it might sound far-fetched, is that what if, and you read a lot of news about aging societies, infertility, and so on. And I said, what if that becomes universal, and the world stop having babies? And the way I put it is 1 year, and then next year suddenly it dropped by half. Everyone's happy because population is a problem, it's a headache. And then suddenly, wow, yeah, birth rate was dropped, was half last year, so everyone was happy. And then next year, half again, until eventually there's only a few babies per year, worldwide. And then what happened next is interesting, because being an engineering background, I don't just use my artistic license or whatever. I actually use a spreadsheet to try to simulate population dynamics, what would happen. And to my surprise, I found out that it takes us a long time to die off. So the world would remain overpopulated. The average age would actually go to 60, 65, 70. And then I said, in a world with like a few billion people, and we just get no babies, what would happen? We have no choice. I figure the only reasonable scenario is that we would all continue to do whatever we're doing. I'm maybe 78 or 90, or Julian, we would still come to bookstores and talk about this story. And by then I can say, I told you when I was young, when I was in my 60s. But that's a kind of interesting, but retirement has to be postponed, and everything has to be. But we need the same social structure. We're stuck in the rut, so to speak, in order to continue. But to a point. But because at some point people start dying off, and you're too old, you pass that critical mass, you cannot, for example, mining would have to stop because it's just too old. Mining, then power plants have to be shut down, and so on. So at some point, when the youngest man, the last babies, he's now 42 years old, and he happened to be a Hong Kong Eurasian, so he's 42 years old already, and then now you look at Hong Kong, there's only maybe a couple of thousand people left, but in small pockets of a few here, a few there, because there's very little, there's no transportation, so there's very little communication between them. Obviously no cell phones and no Facebook. And So what do? They go back and they start. They have to grow their own. They have to grow their own vegetables, gardens, chicken, and so on. And they have to protect chickens, for example, from the dogs. Dogs is interesting because I figure dogs will become. It's our best friend right now, and because we are the emperor on the food chain. But at some point, you think about it, dogs will be the first one to question. Exactly, to be fair and question our indisputable, we don't have sharp teeth and so on. So dogs become, they're trying to see whether they can be masters more than above us, and for very reasonable. And you think about all these, what I call them postmodern savages, they live in Hong Kong, effectively like cavemen, but very different from our Stone Age ancestors, because we have knowledge that makes a big difference. We know how to survive, and we have a lot of infrastructure. You can live in the nicest house on the peak. You can take over Discovery Bay. We can just take turns being the king of Discovery Bay and so on. 7-Eleven's all yours. And interestingly, a lot of the alcohol especially, a lot of the drinks, they don't go bad. So imagine you might have 15 people living in Discovery Bay, and with all the, do a bit of farming, and with all the variables, they just sit around and start chit-chatting. So I created these characters that they have opposing views, but in our world they probably wouldn't talk to each other, because one is extreme left, one is extreme right. But in the future, they don't have much choice, and they discover each other to be good friends.
So like the apocalyptic setting is almost utopic.
In some ways, yes. I was saying, people say, is that dystopian? I said, it really depends on what you think. Imagine a few guys having an expired beer in Discovery Bay. You look up, you see the Milky Way, you see all the stars you can. You look out the harbor, there'll be dolphins, diving in and out. You would see the bottom probably outside the pier. The air is fresh, sweet almost. And there's no more bad guys. Bad guys are the first one to die off, because you think about it, if there is no competition and no environmental, no competitive stress, I don't believe there's any bad guys cannot exist. They only exist when there's competitive stress, and there's reason to be greedy and to be stupid. And so that's the setting. And I know that if I keep thinking about these problems in a book, that would be outrageously boring. So I create this character that I asked a lot of, I think, quite serious questions. And I think although I thankfully have a lot of good comments on Amazon and so on from readers, there is one guy who really disliked it. So there's one bad comment. Basically, he said, I was expecting something to be exciting, and this is all philosophical crap. So maybe
it's probably a comment on him, not a comment on
could be. No, but it may not be for everybody. Obviously, no books for everybody. But I've asked a lot of serious questions, like what is love? What is compassion? You think about urban compassion. At the opening scene, is a guy. You're walking down, there's no one left anymore, there's no hospital, nothing. You see a guy who's dying on the street, what do? You feel bad, you can't just leave him there. But on the other hand, he's a stranger who needs help, but you cannot help him because you have to farm, there's no Medicare, you cannot help him. But you feel very bad just leaving him dying on his own. And that kind of dilemma that we take for granted, because if it happens now, if I go out, I see someone dying on the street, first thing I do, okay, I'll be late for dinner, doesn't matter because I'm a good guy. I call 999, I call for ambulance, I'm helping this guy, and meanwhile I might go get him a bottle of water, I say, are you okay, so, but I stay with him until the ambulance comes, and then, oh, sorry, I'm a bit late, I gotta go, but you cannot do that anymore. So a lot of dilemma, what about father and son, under that situation, when you are facing illnesses, you're facing possible imminent death, do you want your son to take care of you? Because you know he cannot afford to, and so on. But anyway, I asked a lot of these questions, and I try to, the answer comes through in a comical or ridiculous manner, just to make it fun, and leave it also because I know there's no one answer, so I leave it up to the reader to just sort of, you know, trigger a thinking process. And from there, we look back and see how we live, and a lot of things we take for granted, and hopefully people won't find that dystopian, rather than thought-provoking, rather than dystopian. I think that's about it, you know. And I think there's just a few friends here who want to ask any question, want to provoke me into thinking differently, and so on.
Did you have an intended or an ideal audience when you wrote it, or does one not do that and just write?
I didn't have an ideal audience. No, I think that I never expected it to be a thriller that would attract a very big audience. You know, and in fact, it's last much longer than I expected. With a good work of Julian, you know, you need a tenacious spirit to keep books going these days. I think I've got the right part in here.
That's very kind.
And like, I always wonder about environmental engineers. I always kind of see environmental engineering as like the corrective to engineering. You know, every kind of engineering innovation causes two other problems, and environmental engineering tries to like fix. So was it cathartic for you to write this? I mean, I don't know. I would just be, if I was an environmental engineer, I'd be even more angry than I am now when I see like wasted resources and misdirected funds and just the way the world operates. You know, I'm constantly, and maybe this is more a comment on me, I guess. I'm constantly kind of judging people for, you know, how they use social space or how they use resources. So you writing a text like this, does that enable you to like let go of that, or did you not have that feeling before?
Yeah, actually I do let go of that. Good question, you know. Yeah, but my feeling, I don't look at myself as an environmentalist in a sense. Like I say, I take a very pragmatic angle. This is survival. We're doing something very stupid, and doubly stupid because it's benefiting nobody. If I, you know, in the old days, if I had to burn down the forest to grow rice to feed the village, I see that's exploitation, and that's causing environmental stress, you know, where we live. But that's humans, you know. If we live, we're always going to be causing environmental harm to a certain degree, and hurting other species, but to a very small extent, and because it's necessary. But what we're doing now is not necessary. I would say overwhelmingly unnecessary. So, and we are not, like I say jokingly, we're not even benefiting ourselves. We make ourselves fat and lazy and stressed and so on, and hurt the future in the meantime. So that's number one question. And related to your comment. And number two, it's even more relevant, is when I was an environmental engineer, which is a business person also, because I need projects and so on. I see so much, I don't know whether I should call it hypocrisy, because a lot of times it's unintended. But that's the way the world functions now. And the issues we face are very complex. And yet, at the same time, we take a more simple-minded approach, because the complex approach has no audience. It's boring. And a lot of the politicians now are not leaders, like whatever this nasty Homo sapiens used to be for thousands of years. Now they are, in many ways, almost officially, they're followers, because they just say, what you guys want to do? I'll deliver. I'll try to deliver. And then next thing you find that he's also a liar because he cannot deliver. But that's another issue. But we have such a complex challenge to the long-term well-being of Homo sapiens. At the same time, we have used a very simple-minded populist approach, and no one, I know everyone just spent time talking about it. I'll give you one example. I was so frustrated, you know, because towards the end I was also working for big corporations doing solid waste garbage. And I was discussing with a bunch of environmentalists and electrical members, you know, over zero waste. I've turned it into a comical situation in this book. They want zero waste for Hong Kong, 8 million people. You know, you can do it maybe for a village of 50 or maybe even 200. Yes, you can. No more than that. And isn't that a waste of time? And a lot of this waste of time consume resources, and they actually causes pollution in the process. A lot of hot air, and then nothing's done. And everyone's happy because we sat around, we had a very noble goal. We want to make Hong Kong zero waste because our waste is hurting the environment.
So we flew in our private jets there, and we sat in air-conditioned rooms and
yeah,
5-star hotels.
Yeah, so
2 weeks wasting resources.
So the long answer to your comment, yes, I do let go of some of that. I do see that as actually very dangerous, you know. But I don't know how to stop it. To be honest, it's still like that.
James, did you talk about the plot of the novel? Did you plan out the plot in great detail, or some kind of details, or did you just invent the characters and let them take them wherever they want to take you? Just to give you an example, did the heroine in the story get pregnant right from the beginning in your mind, or did she get pregnant because at one point she tells you that, well, make me pregnant, that's going to be a great end to the story?
Yeah, that's a great question about process, right?
Yeah. Did you have a very clear idea of how you're going to begin, to how to continue, and how to end it, and just fill in the slots, or
no,
it's a very spontaneous kind of process?
One part of it I planned very carefully. You know, so in a way I wrote it more like a technologist in that sense.
Okay.
I want to make sure that it's credible, the whole thing. You know, because that's why I even simulated the population dynamics. I don't want anyone to. You can just have a simple calculator and say, oh, come on, that's not possible, because it's easy. If for example, if I say, oh, there's no more babies, and 15 years later, you know, there's only 200 people left in Hong Kong. And then I can start my story, but someone can just go back. How's that possible? You know, I want to make sure that's watertight, and I have that. And from there, I planned. I had those characters in mind. I did have all the characters in mind from the very beginning. And in fact, I wrote a CV for each of the characters. I had a very detailed 4 or 5 pages. Say, Song Sang, 42 years old, height. It doesn't come out in the book. Doesn't have to be. You know, what does he look like? Then the interaction. Of course, I have the big framework. This is the end of the world. You know, there's only a few of them. A lot of the details, no, I didn't plan it at all. And in fact, I found that was the funnest part in writing the novel. Once you get going, right? You know, for 7-8 months, that's all I was doing. You know, I was hardworking then. And I wake up. First thing, you know, start to know, like sometimes 5 o'clock in the morning, I start thinking, ideas come to mind. It's almost like I was discovering what they want to do, you know. Day by day, I'm discovering what this guy wants to do. And I said, yes, it makes sense. And then I started to write. So that part, all the details are not in the plot. And because it's not, my plot is thematic and, you know, almost environmental. Rather than
the pregnancy.
Yeah, the pregnancy. No, the pregnancy. That is a good pregnancy. Yeah, it was a discovery. It was a discovery. You know.
Didn't plan it.
No, I didn't plan it in the beginning. In the beginning, it was almost okay. It's just the scene, and then it sort of dies out. But towards the end, it became yeah. So there was hope, and I honestly wasn't.
What about other, speaking of influences, you know, it makes me think of this film called Children of Men, where the babies disappear, and it's starring Clive Owen, who refused the James Bond role to do this film. Yeah. And it's about people not having babies anymore, and finally they have to secure a baby, and there's a baby born at the very end.
I've browsed through it after I wrote the book, and you said that's also about baby, but it's very, very different story.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, there's that Grapes of Wrath conceit is there, right? And I was thinking too of, like, there's an urban theorist from California named Mike Davis who charts like what Las Vegas would be like 100 years after people left it, with like trees growing back and animals running through the city, like that kind of stuff, and like, or other like utopian satires, like other kind of influences that you thought of when you're writing the text.
Not those end time.
Not apocalyptic
influences.
text.
No, but there was one book that actually, because I had the idea about creating this scenario, and then have characters discuss a lot of the questions I have in mind, and I was very aware that in order to do that kind of a discussion book, idea book, I have to make it interesting. It has to be comical, or at least kind of amusing.
Without being didactic.
Without being didactic, exactly. Yeah. So that I was very aware of that, and then I said, but still, it's a discussion book. Then I remember one book encouraged me a lot. It was another one of my favorite books, which I think very few people would like. It's Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain.
Yeah, I love that.
You know,
It's an 800-page novel. It's so great. It's so great. It's difficult and long, but wonderful.
Oh yeah, I thought I'd never meet someone else who really liked it. I really love that book. Well, but if Thomas Mann can write a book like that with all this really philosophical musing on top of the mountain where people are suffering from consumption and whatever, I can write a book and make it more, at least a bit more amusing than Thomas Mann's German attitude. So I said, okay, I'll try that. I have never read my own writing because I happen to think that most writers are not good readers, and reading and writing are two different talents, skills. But I know that I cannot avoid it all the time, so I selected two passages and tried to read it. I have to practice it, and I think it gives a glimpse of how I try to portray the world, the Hong Kong in this post-savage era. So this is how Robinson Row, part of it, would look like through these two paragraphs. The covered footbridge once served as a concourse to disperse peak hour pedestrians regurgitated by one of the longest escalator systems in the world. Things were measured against each other to see which was the longest, fastest, tallest, biggest, or most expensive. Each morning, the longest elevator carried mid-level residents, middle class and middle-aged, at high performance RPM down to Central. In the evening, clunk, 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 the mechanical drudgery would be reversed to haul them back up, fully stressed. Another day's work done. Primetime TV ahead. The elevated concourse straddles the main artery Robinson Road. Ma converted it into his home and vegetable garden nearly 10 years ago. He keeps chicken in the penthouse of an adjacent building and lives out there himself. It's open, but shielded by the stone wall and a few buildings positioned like protective giant screens. There's a thick layer of natural deposits at street level, but the soil is too grainy and unstable. The road drains have either collapsed or clogged, turning Robinson Road into a mini river when there is a downpour. A garden at street level would be washed out before very long. The hanging garden is also a welcome source of supplementary water. Hong Kong has been more tropical than subtropical for decades. The late afternoons are drenched by predictable showers, brief but heavy. With the clever modification Song's father designed before his disappearance, the roof drains serve to satisfy most of Ma's irrigation water needs. The escalator carves a refreshing breezeway through the concrete jungle below. In a deadly still summer night, sleep-inducing sapphires from the sea would straggle up this urban fissure for a brief moment of turbulence before vanishing into the windless night. A perfect location which blocks the wind when too strong and channel it back when too weak. Good feng shui.
Very nice.
So that's
It's kind of a nice marriage of like the pragmatic and the spiritual,
yeah.
which I guess is why it's called the Taoist.
Yeah. And he's a very pragmatic spiritualist, actually.
Yeah, like religious Taoism and philosophical Taoism. Good feng shui. And how about your word choices? You use a thesaurus and you accessibly edit, or does it come out like that?
I'd say I wrote the story itself very quickly. I said relatively quickly. 7-8 months, it's all done. And I spend the next year or two editing it, rewriting it. Yeah. And then I would notice repetition or something. So then I would try to find alternative ways of expressing it, and then I would use the thesaurus. And also I exercise a bit of discipline. I try to keep it a habit almost to now. Whatever I've written, the ideas are there, and then I leave it for a couple of days to age. Yeah, and then I come back. When I come back, I target. I remove 30%. I trim it by 30% minimum, because I find that whenever I look back, it's always too wordy. So I maybe I don't need to. Maybe even 40 at the beginning, but maybe I don't need to trim it so much anymore because I'm slightly more experienced. Slightly more experienced, but still trimming, to me, it's a very necessary discipline.
I tell you that you could have improved it by increasing it.
I know at the different, but he's a literature specialist, right? He's a professional. But he said that my book should be thicker. He said there's a lot more in there.
That's a great compliment.
Yeah, it is.
Usually people want the books trimmed.
I actually trim a lot.
If you're inspired by or the Magic Mountain, I mean, which is such a thick brick, right?
I think he could have trimmed it by half. Although I enjoy every page of it, but still, and the way he wrote in his old-fashioned English, just how you can take up to 4 or 5 lines, So, fishes have a memory of only a few seconds. John could not remember where he heard that. He had read that. Bullshit, he thought, as he watched the flurry of activities around the sunken barge. The supposedly forgetful creature evidently recognized his looming silhouette and associated it with a tiny shower of ancient crumbs. They were warming up their fins and jaws for the imminent contest. John was sitting on his bollard at Queen's Pier. He came here each morning after the run to read, feed the fish, and then drop a line when lunchtime neared. When he did not feel like fishing, he would daydream or give the bollard a coat of paint. It was the only object in all of Central that still gleamed with artificial vanity. 50 meters away was City Hall, a few ugly square blocks from the 1960s. It escaped redevelopment because by the time conservation had become belatedly fashionable in Hong Kong, most old buildings had been dumped into the harbor to make land. Having survived the process of elimination, the City Hall became a classic by default. That things have faded through. John now stored his fishing tackles at the reception hall. The harbor, once a receiving body of millions of toilets, was crispy blue, teeming with wide-eyed and unsuspecting life. A colorful fish called green coats was John's favorite. It had a parrot-like beak adapted to crack sea urchins and silky smooth flesh under flamboyant turquoise scales. Postmodern fish may not be forgetful, but they sure were dumb, ready to bite at anything. A piece of yarn or a strip of plastic would make good baits. Like the trawlers that used to scrape the harbor's barren floor a few times daily, fish had become similarly plentiful, desperate, and stupid. There was, after all, an advantage in being an endangered species yourself while other edible ones thrived. He dropped the last handful of crumbs and rubbed his hands. The fish leapt for them, making slippery flip-flop sounds. They remind John of the stock exchange floor, with brokers bumming around like pinballs. John found the submarine bustle hypnotic like campfire. he could watch for hours. A giant shadow flitted past. The bargefish vanished instantly as if by magic, then reappeared just as fast. So fast that John was unsure if anything had happened at all. A giant fish, momentary blackout, shadow of a huge bird. He looked up. A few kites glided haughtily by, looking down at the world, searching for rats. None of these. He looked out towards the sea and caught the blinding reflection of the morning sun. Then the shadows returned. This time they surfaced and splashed. Oh! A pod of dolphins leaped about 30 meters ahead. Chinese white dolphins, pink in color. Before he recovered from the shock, they had circled back. 5, perhaps 6, 7. They jumped and dived in perfect synchronization, clicking, squealing. They're so happy, he murmured. So, thank you for listening.